They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I prefer mine served with a side of quarterly reports and a $100,000 per day garnish. When my new director called my mandatory compliance trip to The Hague a glorified vacation and slashed it from the budget, I didn't argue, I didn't explain, I just smiled, filed his email, and started counting down. 47 days until the licenses expired. 47 days until his cost-cutting genius would cost the company more than my entire department's annual budget. This wasn't a vacation he was canceling. It was a ticking time bomb wrapped in international regulations. My name is Clara Hastings, and I've spent 15 years navigating the labyrinth of international tech regulations. At 37, I'd earned my stripes as head of European legal operations at Orbian Dynamics, a New York-based tech conglomerate that liked to think of itself as disruptive, but couldn't disrupt its way out of a Dutch parking ticket without my signature. The London boardroom smelled of leather and hubris that Tuesday morning. 23 executives arranged around a mahogany table that cost more than most people's annual salary. And at the head sat our newest addition, Miles Creighton, Executive Director of Operations, fresh from McKinsey with a Harvard MBA and the social awareness of a bulldozer in a butterfly garden. 2 weeks. That's how long he'd been warming his executive chair, and already he was optimizing everything that moved. His PowerPoint slides gleamed with promises of synergistic cost reduction and lean operational excellence. I'd seen his type before. They swept through companies like locusts, consuming everything that looked like excess on a spreadsheet, never understanding that some expenses weren't costs. They were insurance policies. Now, moving to slide 17. Miles clicked his presenter with the confidence of someone who'd never had to explain to Dutch regulators why their paperwork was 3 days late. I've identified several redundancies in our European operations. For instance, he paused for effect, his laser pointer landing on my department's quarterly budget. This biannual business trip to The Hague. 12,000 euros for what amounts to a rubber stamp in the digital age? Every eye in the room turned to me. Some sympathetic, most curious, a few already calculating how my defeated acceptance would shift the office power dynamics. Miles continued, warming to his theme. Ms. Hastings has been taking these. Let's call them what they are. European vacations twice a year. 5-star hotels, business class flights, per diem expenses that could fund a small startup. For what? To hand-deliver documents that could be sent via DocuSign? I set down my Mont Blanc pen, a gift from the previous CEO who understood the value of keeping regulators happy, and met his gaze. Miles had that peculiar American confidence that came from never having operated outside the Anglosphere, never having navigated the Byzantine requirements of European Union tech compliance. The Netherlands Technology Authority requires in-person verification for our Category A data processing licenses, I said, voice steady as sterling silver. It's not optional, it's regulatory. Everything's negotiable, Miles shot back, already drunk on his own perceived victory. I've already spoken with Erin from the Florida office. She's eager to prove herself, and she assures me she can handle this digitally. We're in the 21st century. Clara, time to act like it. Erin, 23 years old, fresh from University of Miami with a degree in communications and the international experience of a spring break in Cancun. I'd seen her Instagram. She thought The Hague was in Germany. The room waited for my response. They expected protests, PowerPoints of my own, perhaps a carefully worded email to the CEO about regulatory risks. Instead, I gave them something far more dangerous, compliance. Understood, I said, closing my leather portfolio with a soft snap that echoed in the sudden silence. I'll transfer all relevant documentation to Erin by end of business today. Miles blinked, clearly expecting more resistance. Well, excellent. See? This is the kind of forward-thinking cooperation that will take Orbian to the next level. The next level? I almost smiled. He had no idea how many levels down he was about to descend. As the meeting adjourned, I gathered my things with practiced calm. Our CFO, Jennifer, touched my elbow as we filed out. Clara, are you sure about this? The Dutch are notoriously particular about. Miles has made his decision, I replied, loud enough for him to hear. I'm sure Aaron will handle everything beautifully. That afternoon, I sent Aaron 47 files, each meticulously labeled, with step-by-step instructions that would have made sense to anyone who'd spent more than 5 minutes in international compliance. I CC'd Miles on everything. The email signature included my favorite Yeats quote, "The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity." Neither of them would get the reference. That was the point. The September deadline was circled in red on my calendar, the same calendar Miles had dismissed as analog thinking. In exactly 47 days, those licenses would expire. The same licenses that allowed us to process 50 million in daily transactions across the European Union. But hey, at least we'd saved 12,000 euros on my vacation. The next 3 weeks unfolded like a slow-motion car crash where I was the only one who could see the approaching wall. Miles had already turned my unnecessary Hague vacation into his signature victory. A case study in identifying hidden inefficiencies that he presented to the board with the pride of a cat dropping a dead mouse on your doorstep. I attended every presentation, took notes in my moleskin, and nodded at appropriate intervals. When asked for input, I offered only, "Miles has restructured the process beautifully." The words tasted like battery acid, but I swallowed them with a smile. Meanwhile, Erin from Florida was living her best life. Her out-of-office replies became legendary. Currently in Tulum for a wellness retreat, will respond to emails upon returning to consciousness. Namaste. Then Cabo. Then a digital nomad experience in Lisbon where she was finding synergy between work and wanderlust. Her Instagram stories showed infinity pools and Aperol spritzes, while the NLTA compliance portal showed 41 days until expiration. I documented everything with the methodical precision of someone preparing for war. Screenshots, email chains, timestamp records. All backed up to 3 separate encrypted drives. One in my home safe, one in my bank deposit box, and one with my lawyer in Dublin. Because paranoia is just another word for experience in corporate warfare. The beautiful part? I didn't have to lie, sabotage, or scheme. I simply did exactly what was asked of me, nothing. When Thomas from IT asked why I hadn't logged into the NLTA portal in 3 weeks, I forwarded his concern to Miles with a single line. Per our discussion, Aaron is handling all Netherlands compliance matters. When the preliminary warning email arrived from The Hague, in Dutch, naturally, it went to the shared compliance inbox. An inbox I'd been removed from because Miles decided it was more efficient to centralize all European communications under Aaron's purview. I saw the email notification ping on the conference room display during our weekly operations meeting. Miles dismissed it as spam. These European vendors are always trying to upsell something, he laughed. The Dutch government was many things, but a vendor, they were not. By week 4, I'd started my own private countdown. I bought a small champagne bottle, Perrier Jouet, the one with the painted flowers, and placed it in the office refrigerator with a post-it note, "Do not touch, C.H." People assumed it was for a birthday, an anniversary, some celebration. They were right, in a way. Miles, emboldened by his success with my department, had moved on to bigger prey. He'd restructured IT, streamlined HR, and was eyeing the legal department with the hungry look of a shark who'd just discovered a seal colony. The board loved him. His LinkedIn posts about aggressive optimization and disrupting bureaucratic inertia got thousands of likes. One afternoon, while Miles was giving another presentation about his cost-cutting victories, I received a text from Aaron. "Hey Clara, quick question. Do you know if The Hague is the capital of Denmark or Norway? Planning my trip for next month." Next month, our licenses expired in 12 days. I texted back, "Netherlands. The Hague is in the Netherlands." OMG, thanks. I knew it was one of those Viking countries. I screenshotted the conversation and added it to my growing archive, now officially labeled the Fall Files. Then I updated my resume. Not because I needed to. 3 headhunters had already reached out this month alone, but because it felt like arranging flowers for a funeral that hadn't happened yet. Jennifer from finance cornered me by the coffee machine on day 38. Clara, I've been reviewing the European transaction protocols, and I noticed our NLTA certification expires soon. Shouldn't we? That's Aaron's responsibility now, I replied, stirring my coffee counterclockwise. A habit from my grandmother who insisted it brought bad luck to your enemies. Miles was very clear about the new structure. But Erin's in Tulum. Actually, she's in Lisbon now, digital nomading. Jennifer's face went through several expressions, finally settling on understanding. You're documenting everything, aren't you? I took a sip of my coffee. I'm following Miles's directive to the letter. The letter, she repeated slowly. Not the spirit. The spirit was to save 12,000 euros and call my regulatory compliance work a vacation. I'd say the letter is all that's left. She walked away shaking her head. But I caught her smile in the reflection of the coffee pot. Jennifer had been there for the last 3 optimizers who'd blown through our company. She knew the pattern: arrival, disruption, destruction, departure. The only variable was the size of the crater they left behind. That evening, I stood at my office window, watching the London skyline pierce the gray September clouds. Somewhere in The Hague, a Dutch regulatory officer was probably updating their non-compliance database, adding Orbian dynamics to a list that would soon trigger penalties worth more than Miles's entire annual salary. Per day. My phone buzzed. Another LinkedIn notification. Miles had just posted about the courage to challenge institutional thinking with a photo of him standing in front of our logo. I liked the post. Then I opened my calendar and drew a red circle around September 15th. Adding a single note, check champagne temperature. The countdown had reached single digits, and Miles Creighton was about to learn why some vacations aren't vacations at all. They're the thin line between operational success and regulatory apocalypse. Miles turned my canceled vacation into his personal TED Talk. Every meeting, every presentation, every casual coffee chat became an opportunity to showcase his brilliant cost-cutting intuition. He'd created a whole slide deck about it. Identifying hidden waste, a case study in challenging assumptions. The animated airplane with a red X through it had become his signature slide transition. You see, he'd tell anyone within earshot. Clara had been taking these trips for years, and nobody questioned it because that's how we've always done it. But I asked the simple question, why? Why can't we handle this digitally? And you know what? Nobody could give me a real answer. I was usually in the room for these performances, sitting quietly with my leather portfolio, taking notes about nothing in particular. Sometimes I'd write grocery lists in cursive. Sometimes I'd draft resignation letters I'd never send. Once, I wrote out the entire penalty structure of the Netherlands Technology Authority from memory, including the compounding daily fees and the criminal liability clauses that kicked in at day 30 of non-compliance. The board ate it up. Our CEO, Richard Blackstone, personally congratulated Miles in front of the entire European leadership team. This is exactly the kind of fresh thinking Orbian needs, he'd said, clapping Miles on the shoulder. Too many people here are stuck in the past, married to outdated processes. His eyes had found mine across the room. I'd raised my coffee cup in a mock toast. The 12,000 euros we'd saved became a running joke in the executive meetings. Miles had even created a digital counter on his office wall showing days since last unnecessary Hague trip, 73, with a sub-counter showing money saved, $12,000. He'd tag me in the company Slack with photos of it, adding champagne emojis and victory hands. I responded to each one with a simple thumbs up. On September 3rd, 12 days before the deadline, I watched Miles present his quarterly achievements to the board. My vacation was bullet point number 1, complete with a cost-benefit analysis that would have been impressive if it hadn't been built on the business equivalent of quicksand. Some people, Miles said, his eyes finding mine, told me it couldn't be done. They said the Dutch regulators were too rigid, too old-fashioned. But I believe in challenging every assumption, questioning every requirement. And look where we are now. Fully compliant, fully digital, and 12,000 euros richer. The applause was enthusiastic. Someone actually whistled. After the meeting, Miles cornered me by the elevator. No hard feelings, right, Clara? It's just business. Nothing personal. Of course not, I replied, pressing the down button. You've revolutionized our compliance process. He preened. Actually preened, like a peacock who'd just discovered mirrors. I'm thinking of writing a book about it. Disrupting Compliance, a Digital-First Approach. What do you think? I think you should definitely do that, I said as the elevator arrived. Maybe include a chapter about September 15th. What's September 15th? The elevator doors began to close. Just a date I remember for some reason. That afternoon, I sent one final email to Aaron, CCing Miles and the entire compliance distribution list. Aaron. As per Miles's restructuring, please confirm that all NLTA renewals have been completed for the September 15th deadline. As you know, this affects our ability to process any EU data transactions. Best regards, Clara Hastings, former head of European Legal Operations. I particularly enjoyed typing former. It wasn't technically true yet, but it would be soon enough. Erin's response came 3 hours later, sent from her phone. Hey, Clara! Sorry. What's NLTA? Is that the thing in Amsterdam? I'm planning to handle it when I get back next month. Already booked my flights for October. So excited to see Amsterdam. I screenshot it, added it to the fall files. Then I updated my out-of-office message for September 16th. I will be unavailable due to a pre-scheduled vacation. For all compliance-related emergencies, please contact Miles Creighton directly. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about what you do. It's about what you don't do. And what I wasn't going to do was save a man who'd spent 3 months calling my life's work a vacation from the consequences of his own hubris. I opened my desk drawer and checked the champagne bottle one more time. Still cold, still waiting. The post-it note now had a date. September 16th, Miles had saved 12,000 euros. In 6 days, he'd start losing 100,000 per day, every day. Until someone flew to The Hague and begged the Dutch government for forgiveness in person. Someone. But not me. I locked my desk drawer and spun the combination. Outside my window, London hummed with the usual afternoon chaos. Somewhere in that maze of glass and steel, Miles was probably updating his LinkedIn, adding compliance innovator to his growing list of self-appointed titles. I smiled. It was the kind of smile that would have worried anyone who knew me well. But nobody at Orbian knew me well. They knew Clara the compliance officer, Clara the regulation expert, Clara who took unnecessary vacations to The Hague. They were about to meet Clara the patient, Clara the prepared. Clara who understood that revenge, like compliance, was all about the timing. September 15th fell on a Thursday. I knew because I'd been watching it approach like a meteor on a collision course with Earth, except I was the only one with a telescope. I arrived at the office at 7:43 a.m., earlier than usual. The morning light painted London's skyline gold, and I made myself a perfect cup of Earl Grey in the executive kitchen. The champagne bottle still sat in the refrigerator, patient as a spider. By 9 a.m., the first dominoes began to fall, though nobody heard them yet. The NLTA's automated system would have switched our status from active to expired at midnight Amsterdam time, 6 hours ahead of us. While Miles had been sleeping in his Notting Hill townhouse, dreaming of his next optimization, our company had already become legally radioactive in European data processing terms. I spent the morning in mundane meetings, discussing Q4 projections and holiday schedules. Miles held court in the main conference room, unveiling his new lean operations framework. I sat in the third row, taking notes about absolutely nothing, occasionally checking my personal phone where I'd set up alerts for any mentions of Orbian dynamics on European regulatory sites. At 11:47 a.m., the first ping appeared. A small notice on the NLTA's public disclosure page. Orbian Dynamics, license status, expired, grace period, concluded. I screenshot it and added it to my collection. Lunch was spectacular. Miles had organized a victory feast to celebrate the end of Q3 and his successful cost reductions. Sushi from Nobu. Champagne, how ironic. And a cake shaped like a graph showing upward trajectory. He gave a speech about courage and leadership and the power of questioning everything. Some people, he said, raising his glass and looking directly at me, are married to the old ways. They can't imagine a world where things are done differently. But we've proved them wrong, haven't we? Everyone raised their glasses. I raised mine too, filled with water that sparkled like diamonds in the afternoon light. To the future, Miles toasted. To the future. We echoed. At 2:23 p.m., I watched the first transaction fail. It was small, a routine data transfer from our Frankfurt office to London. The error message was in German, but the meaning was universal. Access denied, nobody noticed. These kinds of glitches happened all the time. It would handle it. By 3 p.m., the denials were cascading. Brussels couldn't access customer databases. Paris lost connection to the payment processing system. Rome's entire CRM went dark. But everyone was in meetings, planning for Q4, discussing Miles's revolutionary frameworks. The IT help desk started getting calls, but they assumed it was a server issue. Have you tried turning it off and on again? I left at 5 p.m. sharp, unusual for me. Early night, Jennifer asked, passing me in the hallway. I'm taking a long weekend, I replied, following Miles' advice about work-life balance. She looked at me strangely. I'd never taken a long weekend in my entire tenure. At 5:47 p.m., while I was on the tube heading home, the first client complained. Deutsche Bank couldn't process a routine transaction worth $2.3 million. Then Siemens reported access issues, then Volkswagen, then Air France. I know because I watched it all unfold on my phone, the complaints rolling across my screen like a beautiful disaster in real time. Our European client's Slack channel, which I still had access to because nobody remembered to remove me, lit up like a Christmas tree having a nervous breakdown. Miles wouldn't see any of it until tomorrow. He was at a dinner with potential investors, promoting his lean operations framework to anyone who would listen. His phone would be on silent because leaders weren't slaves to technology. That evening, I opened a bottle of Bordeaux, a good one, the 2010 I'd been saving, and sat on my balcony watching the Thames reflect the city lights. My phone buzzed occasionally with automated alerts from various monitoring systems I'd set up over the years. Each one another confirmation that Orbian Dynamics' European operations were slowly, systematically, grinding to a halt. The beautiful part? This wasn't sabotage. This wasn't revenge in any active sense. This was simply the natural consequence of treating regulatory compliance like a vacation. The Dutch government didn't care about Miles's PowerPoints or his frameworks or his digital-first philosophy. They cared about paperwork, properly filed, in person, on time. At 11 p.m., I checked the NLTA portal one last time. Our status had been updated. Expired, enforcement pending, daily penalties accruing. I did the math. $100,000 per day, starting from midnight Amsterdam time on September 15th. By the time Miles arrived at the office tomorrow morning, we'd be $200,000 in the hole. By Monday, when the senior leadership finally understood what had happened, we'd be approaching $500,000. All to save $12,000 on my vacation. I closed my laptop and poured another glass of wine. Tomorrow, while the London office descended into chaos, I'd be on a train to Brighton. I'd booked a room at the Grand, the one with the sea view. I'd have afternoon tea and walk along the pier and possibly buy one of those ridiculous sticks of rock candy that no one actually eats. My phone buzzed one more time. An email from Aaron. Hi, Clara. Super weird. I can't log into any of our European systems from Lisbon. Is there like a password reset or something? Thanks. I didn't respond. That wasn't my job anymore. My job had been to fly to The Hague twice a year, maintain our regulatory compliance, and keep the European operations running smoothly. But Miles had decided that was a vacation. Tomorrow, he'd learn the difference. I raised my glass to the London skyline, to the Netherlands Technology Authority, and to the beautiful, terrible accuracy of consequences. To the future, I said to no one in particular, and drank deep. September 18th, Monday morning. I sat in the Brighton Grand's restaurant, enjoying Eggs Benedict with a view of the pier, while my phone buzzed like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. 17 missed calls from Miles, 23 from Jennifer, 41 from various IT managers, and one very interesting voicemail from Richard Blackstone, our CEO, that began with, "Clara, we need you back in London immediately." I turned my phone to silent and ordered another cappuccino. By the time I leisurely returned to London that evening, Orbian Dynamics had lost access to 73% of its European operations. The remaining 27% were running on cached data that would expire within hours. Our clients were beyond furious. They were litigious. The phrase breach of contract had appeared in 16 different emails, in 4 different languages. Tuesday morning, I walked into the office at precisely 9 a.m. The usual morning bustle had been replaced by barely controlled panic. IT staff ran between floors like their hair was on fire. The legal department had apparently been in session since 3 a.m. The coffee machines on every floor were empty, casualties of war. Miles stood in the middle of the chaos, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his signature confidence replaced by something that looked remarkably like fear. He spotted me immediately. "Clara!" He actually ran toward me. Miles Creighton, who once said running in the office was undignified, sprinted across the marble lobby. "Thank God you're here. We have a situation." "Oh?" I set down my bag with deliberate calm. "What kind of situation?" "The Dutch. The fucking Dutch have locked us out of everything. Some kind of license issue." "But that's impossible because Aaron—" He stopped, the color draining from his face. "Where's Erin?" "According to her Instagram, she's at a wine tasting in Porto." "Porto? But she said she was handling—" "Amsterdam. She thought The Hague was in Amsterdam. Actually, she thought Amsterdam was the capital of Denmark. Or was it Norway? I have the texts if you'd like to see them." Miles looked like he might vomit on his Italian leather shoes. "Can you fix this?" "Me." I tilted my head. "But I'm not in compliance anymore, remember? You restructured. Aaron handles all European regulatory matters now." "Clara, please, this is costing us 100,000 euros per day." I finished. Plus compound penalties after day 5, plus potential criminal liability after day 30, plus the cost of reactivation, which doubles after the first week. I believe we're on day 4 now, so that would be— I pretended to calculate, though I'd known the number for months. 400,000 in base penalties, plus another 300,000 in compounds, plus the emergency reactivation fee of 200,000, just under €1,000,000. So far. His face went from white to green. "You knew. You fucking knew this would happen. I told you. In the meeting, I sent documentation. I provided Aaron with detailed instructions. I CC'd you on everything." I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my saved emails. "Would you like me to forward them again? They're all time-stamped." The elevator dinged, and Richard Blackstone emerged, flanked by the entire board of directors. They looked like they'd been awake for days. Richard's eyes found mine immediately. "Clara. Conference room. Now." The long walk to the executive conference room felt like a funeral procession, if funerals were held in buildings made of glass and broken dreams. Miles trudged behind us, occasionally muttering about digital solutions and unforeseen circumstances. The conference room table was covered in printed emails, regulatory documents, and what looked like a partial transcript of Miles's disrupting compliance presentation. Someone had highlighted the part where he'd called my trips vacations in yellow. The word appeared 17 times. "Explain," Richard said simply. So I did. Calmly, methodically. with the precision of someone who'd been preparing for this moment for exactly 73 days. I pulled up my archived emails, my documentation, my repeated warnings. I showed them Aaron's messages about Vikings and Amsterdam. I presented the NLTA requirements, which explicitly stated, in English and Dutch, that in-person verification was mandatory for Category A licenses. Then I showed them the penalty structure, the real one, not the simplified version Miles had dismissed as scare tactics. As of this morning, I concluded, we owe the Dutch government approximately $400,000. If we don't resolve this by Friday, it doubles. If we don't resolve it within 30 days, criminal charges can be filed against the responsible corporate officers. I paused, looking directly at Miles. That would be the executive director of operations. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and what might have been Miles's soul leaving his body. Richard spoke first. Can you fix this? I can try, but I'll need to fly to The Hague immediately. Today, I'll need to grovel, apologize, possibly bribe someone with stroopwafels, and pray to whatever deity the Dutch worship that they're feeling merciful. Do it. There's one problem, I said, pulling out my company ID. I'm no longer authorized to represent Orbian in regulatory matters. Miles restructured the department, remember? Every head in the room turned to Miles. He looked like he was trying to disappear into his chair through sheer force of will. Reinstate her, Richard said. I'll need it in writing, I replied. And I'll need my original title back. Head of European Legal Operations. With the authority to make compliance decisions without executive approval. Done. And I'll need Miles to apologize. The room went still. Miles's head snapped up. What? You called my professional obligations a vacation, 17 times. In public forums, you undermined my credibility and questioned my integrity. So yes, I'd like an apology. In writing, CC'd to the entire European operations team. Richard nodded. Miles. Miles looked like he was chewing glass, but he managed to nod. I stood, gathering my things. I'll need the company jet. Commercial won't get me there in time. Whatever you need, Richard said. As I reached the door, I turned back. Oh, and Miles, that $12,000 you saved on my last trip, you might want to update your PowerPoint. The actual cost of your optimization is currently running at about $100,000 per day. I left them in silence and headed to my office to pack. The champagne bottle was still in the refrigerator, but I didn't need it anymore. The look on Miles's face had been intoxicating enough. The Gulfstream touched down at Rotterdam The Hague Airport at 3:47 p.m. I'd spent the flight preparing my groveling materials. Apology letters in Dutch, professionally translated, not Google translated like Aaron would have done. A detailed remediation plan. And a box of the finest stroopwafels money could buy from that little shop in Amsterdam that the NLTA director's assistant had once mentioned she loved. The Netherlands Technology Authority building stood like a monument to bureaucratic efficiency. Gray, rectangular, and utterly humorless. I'd been here 14 times over 7 years. The security guard recognized me. Ms. Hastings, he said in perfect English. We thought you weren't coming this year. There was a misunderstanding, I replied. Is Director Vanderberg available? His expression told me everything. She's been expecting you. 5th floor. Director Marika Vanderberg's office hadn't changed. Same sparse furniture, same single orchid on the windowsill, same portrait of the Dutch royal family. What had changed was her expression when I walked in. I'd seen her disapproving before, but this was Olympic-level disdain. Ms. Hastings, she said, not offering me a seat. Your company is 4 days late. 5 days, I corrected, placing the stroopwafels on her desk. And it's inexcusable. She raised an eyebrow. Dutch bureaucrats appreciated accuracy, even in confession. Your company sent us an email from someone named... She checked her screen. Aaron Matthews, informing us that you would be digitizing the compliance process and that physical verification was, and I quote, so Last century. I winced. I can explain. She also asked if we accepted payment in cryptocurrency and whether Amsterdam was, like, super fun at night. Director Vanderberg, I am deeply. She signed the email with 3 kissing emojis. I sat down without permission. How much to make this go away? For the first time in 7 years, I saw Marika Vanderberg smile. It was terrifying. The penalties stand at $500,000 as of this afternoon. The reactivation fee is $200,000. The expedited processing fee is $50,000. And there's a new fee we've just implemented. The emoji harassment fee, that's $25,000. I didn't even blink. $795,000 total. I have transfer authority. Done. Not quite. She leaned back. Your new executive director, Mr. Creighton, sent us a letter 3 weeks ago explaining that our processes were outdated and offering to help us enter the 21st century. He included a PowerPoint. Of course he did. He also suggested that the Netherlands was falling behind in digital innovation and that our insistence on in-person verification was, and I quote again, charmingly antiquated, like windmills and wooden shoes. I put my head in my hands. What do you need? A formal apology. From him, in person, in Dutch. He doesn't speak Dutch. Then he'd better learn quickly. You have 72 hours before I refer this to the criminal division. I looked up. Criminal. Negligent disruption of critical infrastructure. It's a new law. Maximum penalty is 3 years imprisonment. She paused. For the responsible executive, I thought about Miles, about his PowerPoints, about 17 times he'd called my work a vacation. Then I thought about him in a Dutch prison, trying to optimize the lunch queue. I'll have him here within 72 hours, I said. Good. She pulled out the forms I knew by heart. Now, let's process your renewal properly. I assume you have all the required documentation? I pulled out my leather portfolio, the one Miles had mocked as analog thinking. Inside were perfectly organized documents, tabbed and color-coded, exactly the way the NLTA preferred them. Every signature line pre-marked with sticky notes. Every form filled out in the specific blue ink they required. Of course, I said. 2 hours later, I walked out with provisional restoration of our licenses. The full restoration would come after Miles's apology. I called Richard from the car. It's handled, provisionally. But Miles needs to be here within 72 hours to apologize in person, in Dutch, or he faces criminal charges. The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, criminal charges. Negligent disruption of critical infrastructure. It's a new law. Very progressive. The Dutch. Christ, can you teach him Dutch? No. I'll be busy explaining to our European clients why their services were disrupted. That was also part of the deal. I have 17 meetings scheduled over the next 3 days. Clara, there's a Rosetta Stone kiosk at Heathrow. He might want to stop there on his way. I hung up and told the driver to take me to my hotel. The same one I always stayed at, the one Miles had called excessive in his presentation. They'd upgraded me to the penthouse suite when they heard about my situation. The manager's brother worked at the NLTA. That evening, I sat on my balcony overlooking the Binnenhof, sipping excellent wine and watching my phone light up with increasingly frantic messages from Miles. The last one was just, how do you say I'm sorry in Dutch? I texted back, het spijt me zeer. Then I added, but you'll need more than that. You'll need to grovel. In Dutch. For about 20 minutes. While she stares at you? His response was a string of expletives that probably cost him another $25,000 in emoji harassment fees. I turned off my phone and enjoyed the view. Somewhere in London, Miles Creighton was frantically trying to learn Dutch, presumably while updating his resume. The company had lost nearly €1 million. Our reputation with European regulators was in tatters, and 3 of our largest clients were already making contingency plans. All to save $12,000 on my vacation. I raised my glass to the darkening Dutch sky, Tomorrow would bring more meetings, more apologies, more groveling. But tonight I was exactly where I'd always been. In The Hague, handling compliance, doing the work that kept the company running. The only difference was that now, everyone knew it wasn't a vacation. The emergency board meeting convened at 6 a.m. London time on September 21st. I participated via video from The Hague, having just finished my 11th apology meeting with a major European client. My voice was hoarse from explaining, apologizing, and promising that Orbian Dynamics still understood the meaning of regulatory compliance. The boardroom looked like a war zone. Empty coffee cups formed small pyramids on the mahogany table. Richard's usual perfect suit was wrinkled. The CFO had calculator burns on his fingers from manually computing our cascading losses. And Miles looked like he'd aged 5 years in 3 days. "Let's review the damage," Richard began, his voice flat. "Clara." I pulled up my presentation. No animations, no fancy transitions. Just numbers that hit like hammers. Current penalty total, $7.95 in dollars paid to the NLTA. Client compensation for service disruption, $2.3 million in climbing. Lost revenue from suspended transactions, approximately $4.7 million. Legal fees for emergency remediation, $400,000. I paused. Total direct losses as of this morning, $8.175 million. Someone actually gasped. I think it was Miles. Indirect losses are harder to calculate but include reputation damage, 3 major clients initiating contract review clauses, and our Hamburg office union threatening action over management incompetence. I clicked to the next slide. Oh, and the Financial Times is running a story tomorrow. The headline is, Orbian's $12,000 optimization costs millions, a case study in executive hubris. How do they know about the 12,000ers? Richard demanded. I shrugged. These things get out. You know how it is. Miles found his voice. This is sabotage. Clara deliberately. Deliberately what? I interrupted. Followed your direct orders, transferred responsibility as instructed, documented everything in writing. Yes, I did all of that. You knew this would happen. And I told you. Repeatedly. In writing. With documentation. I pulled up an email chain. May 15th. These trips are regulatory requirements. May 22nd. The NLTA does not accept digital submissions. June 3rd. Please reconsider this restructuring. June 10th. I strongly advise against this course of action. Should I continue? The board members looked at Miles like he was radioactive waste. Where do we stand now? Richard asked. I've negotiated provisional restoration. Full restoration requires Miles to appear before Director Vanderberg within, I checked my watch, 51 hours to deliver a formal apology. In Dutch? I've been studying, Miles protested weakly, pulling out note cards covered in phonetic scribbles. Ik ben zeer sorry? It's het spijt me zeer, I corrected. And Director Vanderberg expects a 20-minute presentation on why he was wrong about Dutch bureaucracy being charmingly antiquated. Also in Dutch. 20 minutes? I can barely say hello. Then you'd better learn quickly. Dutch prisons are very progressive, but I doubt you'd enjoy the optimization opportunities. Richard stood up. Miles, you're on the next flight to Amsterdam. The Hague, I corrected. Amsterdam is not the capital. The Hague. Clara, what do you need from us? I smiled for the first time in days. I've prepared a list. The list was comprehensive. Full restoration of my department with expanded budget. Direct reporting to the CEO. Bypassing the executive director of operations entirely. Written confirmation that all European compliance decisions were mine alone. And a formal acknowledgement that my trips to The Hague were essential business functions. Not vacations. Done, Richard said without hesitation. One more thing, I added. Miles's digital counter, the one showing days since last unnecessary Hague trip. I want it removed and replaced with one showing days since last compliance violation. Miles looked like he wanted to object, but wisely stayed silent. There's something else, the CFO interrupted, looking at his laptop. Erin Matthews has been posting about this on social media. She's calling it the Great Amsterdam Mix-Up and treating it like a funny story. She has 17,000 likes. I pulled up her Instagram on the screen. There it was. A selfie of her in Porto with a glass of wine, captioned, "That awkward moment when you thought The Hague was in Amsterdam and accidentally cost your company $8 million. Digital nomad fail. Oopsie, still in Portugal." The room went silent. "Fire her," Richard said quietly. "Today." "She's Miles's hire," I pointed out helpfully. All eyes turned to Miles again. He was studying his Dutch note cards like they contained the secret to time travel. "Miles," Richard said, "after you apologize to the Dutch government, you're taking a leave of absence to reflect on your leadership choices. For how long?" "Indefinitely." I watched Miles' career implode in real time, his face cycling through denial, anger, bargaining, and depression in about 30 seconds. He never quite made it to acceptance. "This isn't fair," he whispered. "I was trying to save money." "No," I said, packing up my laptop. "You were trying to prove you were smarter than everyone else. You called my professional expertise a vacation. You dismissed decades of regulatory knowledge as analog thinking. You thought you could optimize reality itself." I stood to leave, then turned back. "Oh. And Miles, when you meet Director Vanderberg, don't mention windmills or wooden shoes. She really hates that." The screen went dark on my end, leaving them to sort through the wreckage. I had 3 more client meetings that afternoon, then a dinner with the NLTA deputy director to smooth over any remaining ruffled feathers. My phone buzzed. A message from Jennifer in finance. "The champagne in the fridge. It's still there. Should I chill it?" I thought about it, then typed back, "Give it to Miles. He'll need it more than me. Dutch prisons don't serve alcohol." It was petty. It was unnecessary. It was perfect. September 23rd. Miles stood before Director Vanderberg like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. His suit was impeccable, but sweat had already formed a visible line across his forehead. I sat in the corner, officially there as translator, though we all knew I was really there to witness the execution. "Mynheer Creighton," Director Vanderberg began in English, her tone suggesting she was about to enjoy this very much. "Please proceed with your apology." In Dutch. Miles cleared his throat and pulled out his crumpled note cards with shaking hands. Ik ben zeer sorry. Nee, het spijt me zeer dat." He paused, looking at his cards in panic. The next word was completely illegible. "Take your time," the director said sweetly. "We have all day. Your criminal referral doesn't process until 5 o'clock. Miles went even paler and continued stumbling through what might generously be called Dutch, though it sounded more like someone choking on stroopwafels. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. At one point, he accidentally said he was sorry for being a wooden shoe instead of sorry for his assumption. Director Vanderberg's assistant actually had to leave the room to avoid laughing. When it was finally over, Miles stood there, drenched in sweat, waiting for judgment. "Your apology is..." Vanderberg paused dramatically. "Barely acceptable. Your licenses are restored. Do not ever contact this office again unless it's through Ms. Hastings." Outside the building, Miles turned to me. "You enjoyed that?" "Every second," I admitted. "I'm finished at Orbion, aren't I?" "Your resignation letter was announced an hour ago. Richard thought it would be better coming from you. Something about pursuing other opportunities to grow and learn." He laughed bitterly. "Other opportunities. Right." He started walking toward his waiting car, then stopped. "You won. Congratulations." "I didn't win anything, Miles. I just stopped losing." He looked confused, which was becoming his default expression. "You took something that worked perfectly and broke it to prove you could." I explained. "Then you expected me to fix it while you took credit. That's not leadership." It's vandalism with a PowerPoint. His car pulled away, and I never saw Miles Creighton again. I heard he ended up at a startup trying to disrupt traditional farming. Last I checked, they were being sued by multiple agricultural boards for failing to understand why crops need water on a regular schedule. That evening, Richard called me personally. Clara, we need you back in London, permanently. Name your terms. I looked out my hotel window at The Hague's peaceful streets. I'll take the promotion, but I keep my trips here, twice a year. First-class flights, 5-star hotels, generous per diem. That seems essential. The word you're looking for is essential. Of course. Essential. I flew back to London the next morning. The office felt different, quieter, more respectful. People actually listened when I spoke in meetings. My new office was on the executive floor. With a view of the Thames and a door that locked from the inside, Jennifer stopped by with a gift. A framed photo of Miles's digital counter, frozen at days since last unnecessary Hague trip, 73, with a red line through it. I thought you might want a souvenir, she said. I hung it behind my desk, where everyone could see it, but only I could read the small note I'd added at the bottom. The difference between a vacation and a catastrophe. $8.2 million. Erin Matthews, by the way, tried to pivot her Amsterdam mix-up fame into a career as an influencer teaching corporate crisis management. Her first seminar had 3 attendees, 2 of whom were there for the free coffee. She eventually moved back to Florida and became a yoga instructor specializing in bureaucratic breathing techniques. I'm not making that up. The NLTA story became legend in compliance circles. Director Vanderberg even invited me to speak at their annual conference about the importance of in-person verification in the digital age. I gave the presentation in perfect Dutch, which I'd secretly been fluent in for 15 years. As for that champagne in the office fridge, I finally opened it on September 15th the following year, exactly 1 year after our licenses expired. I shared it with my team, my expanded, properly funded, highly respected team, while we watched the sunset from the executive floor. 2 unnecessary vacations, I toasted. 2 expensive lessons. Jennifer countered. 2 knowing the difference. We said together, because that's what this whole story was about. Really. Not revenge, though that was satisfying. Not vindication, though that was sweet. It was about the difference between knowing the price of everything and the value of nothing. Miles knew the price, $12,000. He just never understood the value until it cost him $8.2 million to learn. And me, I still fly to The Hague twice a year. First class, 5-star hotels, generous per diem. Nobody calls it a vacation anymore. They call it what it's always been, absolutely fucking essential. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate karma, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories of workplace justice. And please, share your thoughts. Have you ever dealt with a boss who didn't understand the value of your work? Let me know in the comments. Until next time. Remember, sometimes the best revenge is just letting people face the consequences of their own decisions.